There are moments in the history of conflict where the balance of power is not measured by the stripes on a sleeve or the volume of a shout, but by the terrifying stillness of a predator waiting to be provoked. We often mistake silence for weakness and humility for hesitation, but in the world of elite warfare, the quietest room is often the most dangerous. This is the story of a shadow that chose to walk in the light, a woman who had mastered the art of disappearance, only to be dragged into a confrontation she didn't seek, but was perfectly equipped to finish. In the high-pressure environment of naval operations, where ego often runs as hot as the engines, there exists a rare breed of operator who doesn't need to bark to prove they can bite. But when the line of respect is crossed, and when arrogance attempts to crush dignity, the response is often so swift and so absolute that it leaves the witnesses breathless and the aggressors broken. Our story begins at a high-security naval training facility on the coast of Virginia, a place where the salt air is thick with the sweat of ambition. Among the sea of camouflage and testosterone stood Sarah, a woman whose presence was as understated as her record was classified. She was lean, unassuming, and possessed eyes that seemed to see through people rather than at them. She was there as a guest instructor, a specialist in unconventional maritime extraction, but to the group of veteran petty officers running the base's security detail, she was just an outsider who didn't belong in their boys' club. Leading this group was Miller, a man whose physical size was matched only by his insecurity. To Miller and his cohorts, Sarah represented a challenge to their perceived dominance. They saw her quiet nature as an invitation for intimidation, a target for the kind of schoolyard cruelty that should have been left behind in childhood, but often festers in the ranks of those who equate cruelty with strength. Before we witness the moment that changed everything, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You are watching Tales of Courage, and you won't want to miss the legendary stories we have coming up. The tension had been building for 3 days. It started with whispered comments in the mess hall and escalated to accidental bumps in the corridors. Miller, fueled by the laughter of his peers, decided that the final afternoon of the training cycle was the perfect time to test the guest instructor. He waited until the training bay was crowded, ensuring a maximum audience for what he thought would be a public humiliation. He stepped into her path, his chest puffed out, a sneer plastered across his face as he began a tirade of insults designed to provoke a reaction. He called into question her credentials, her right to be on the base, and her very capability as a sailor. Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her expression unreadable. This lack of reaction only infuriated Miller further. He mistook her discipline for fear. He reached out a heavy hand, moving to shove her shoulder, intending to send her stumbling back to show everyone who truly ran the floor. In the span of a heartbeat, the atmosphere in the room didn't just change, it shattered. As Miller's hand closed the distance, Sarah didn't flinch, she transitioned. With a movement so fluid it looked like a glitch in reality, she stepped inside his reach. There was no wind-up, no wasted energy, only the surgical application of force. A sharp, sickening crack echoed through the silent bay as her palm met his chin, followed instantly by a blur of motion that ended with Miller pinned against the concrete floor. His massive frame hit the ground with a thud that vibrated through the boots of every man standing there. One moment, he was a towering figure of intimidation. The next, he was gasping for air, his arm locked in a position that signaled total surrender, his face pressed into the dust. The silence that followed was absolute, a heavy, freezing vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of the room. The bullies who had been smirking seconds before were now frozen, their mouths agape, staring at the woman who had neutralized their leader before they could even blink.
The aftermath was a study in the collapse of false authority. Sarah released her hold and stood up, her breathing as calm as if she had just finished a casual stroll. Miller scrambled backward on the floor, his face a mask of shock and searing embarrassment. The bravado had evaporated, replaced by a raw, primal realization that he had survived only because she allowed it. The base commander, a seasoned captain who had been watching from the observation deck, descended the stairs. The room snapped to attention, but the captain ignored the protocols. He walked straight to Miller, who was still nursing his pride on the floor, and then looked at Sarah. There was no anger in the captain's eyes, only a profound, weary disappointment directed at his own men. He looked at the group and said, "You saw a woman you thought you could break. What you actually saw was the reason the enemies of this country don't sleep at night." He turned to Sarah and offered a sharp, respectful nod, the kind of nod shared only between those who have seen the dark side of the moon. The moral of this encounter reverberated through the base far longer than the physical pain of the strike. It wasn't just about a fight, it was about the fundamental misunderstanding of what constitutes power. Miller and his crew learned that true skill doesn't need a megaphone. They learned that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who feels no need to prove it. In the military, as in life, respect is the currency of the professional. When you attempt to bank on fear and arrogance, you eventually find yourself bankrupt. Sarah hadn't just defended herself, she had provided a master class in the dignity of the warrior. She showed that discipline is the ultimate shield, and that those who abuse their power are inevitably destroyed by the very thing they think they control. The story of those few seconds in the training bay became a cautionary tale for every incoming class. Never mistake a calm sea for a lack of depth. As the years passed, the incident transitioned from a scandalous rumor into a foundational legend of the facility. It was whispered about late at night in the barracks, told to young sailors who showed signs of an ego getting ahead of their ability. Sarah herself moved on to even more secretive assignments, her name becoming a footnote in official records but a headline in the oral history of the elite communities. The training bay was eventually renovated, but the spot where Miller hit the floor remained a point of pilgrimage for those who understood the lesson. It became a story about the quiet professional, the archetype of the American operator who carries the weight of the world without needing to boast about the burden. It served as a reminder that excellence is silent and that those who are truly awake to their own potential have nothing to prove to those who are still dreaming of greatness. Years later, a young lieutenant caught up with Sarah before her retirement ceremony and asked her why she waited so long to act that day and why she didn't say a word after it was over. She looked at the young officer with those same piercing, calm eyes and offered a piece of wisdom that would be quoted for decades to come. She said, "A lion doesn't need to tell the sheep it's a lion. It only needs to act when the sheep forgets the fence is there for their protection, not mine." With that, she walked away, leaving behind a legacy of quiet strength and a standard of conduct that defined a generation of warriors. What do you think of Sarah's restraint? Have you ever seen someone's arrogance get the better of them in an instant? Let us know in the comments below and share this video with someone who appreciates the power of the underdog. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories from Tales of Courage.